Oh boy, oh boy. All right, well, I'll close that chat and I will, hello, Marika, my favorite podcast from Duetto. And of course, Marlene. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so, hello, folks. Welcome. It's really, really good to be here. This is something I've been talking about in various capacities for years. And I didn't know how exactly I wanted to put it together until finally Marlene reached out to me a couple of weeks ago about this, and I was like, all right, it's now or never. You have to start somewhere, and I'd rather have too much than too little to bring to the table and have to continue at another time. So a little bit about me. Hi, my name is Kimberleigh Roseblade. My pronouns are they, them, and she, her. I identify as a non-binary femme. So both use of pronouns are absolutely great with me. I've been doing HEMA for about 10 years. I started my HEMA journey in Vancouver, British Columbia, and now through a couple of different cities and a couple of different schools later, including starting one of my own, I am now based out of Toronto with the Academy of European Medieval Martial Arts, or Emma, as we like to call her, or as I like to call her, my other girlfriend, because she takes up a lot of my time, especially like pre-COVID days. So yeah, that's who I am, and a lot of the folks that I see here in this chat are people that I've either had the pleasure or honor of working and training alongside, or meeting at various HEMA events from around the globe where I've been fortunate to teach. So a little bit about me and my particular disability, as well as why I've wanted to do this. So I discovered HEMA back in about 2010, and it was maybe about a year later where I started becoming very, very sick. I was having trouble sleeping, I was having immense amounts of pain, and I was noticing that I was having a much longer recovery period from illness, injury, pretty much everything. And initially, I just attributed it to overtraining. I'd always been very athletic, very active, and I didn't really think anything of it. Fast forward a few years later, though, after the Vancouver International Swordplay Symposium of 2013, I was taking off my fencing mask and noticed hair coming out in clumps on the inside. Having trouble closing my gorget around my neck because my lymph nodes were so swollen. I had to actually like change the settings and make it bigger for me. When I went to the doctor, the first initial unfortunate thought that they thought was potentially lymphatic cancer. Once we ruled that out, they said, look, there's a couple of weird things going on in your blood tests or this, something's going up and we don't know what. What's your family history? And I felt like an idiot because I knew this. Both my mother and my biological grandmother have lupus, or in the case of my biological grandmother, she died of complications of lupus just a couple of years after, not even that, about a year after my mother was born. I had even watched my own mother go through similar symptoms, the hair loss, the swollen lymph nodes, the numerous hospital visits and stays. And I just didn't put it together, probably because I didn't even want to believe that that was something that was possible. However, there it was. And I was diagnosed pretty quickly, primarily because when I had gone in to get those initial tests, I was in the course of such a severe flare that all the check marks were ding, 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 ding. However, with a lot of folks with not just lupus, but any sort of chronic condition, it can often take years before proper diagnosis happens. So in typical Kimberleigh fashion, post-diagnosis, I decided that the best way to deal with this was to just push on through as if I did not have some sort of chronic debilitating condition, and thought if I just will my body, if I train hard enough, I can just force it to be able to, I can bend it to my will if I just, figure out the magic way of doing this, or just push through the pain, like, you know, there has to be a way. And what that resulted in was me becoming the sickest that I have ever become in my entire life. I underwent numerous hospital stays. During this time, my lupus attacked my heart, because it can affect the organs, and it was also attacking my central nervous system, and I was having seizures and blackouts. Obviously, what I was trying to do wasn't working. On top of that, you know, there were other things that were happening in my life that were also causing, you know, disruption and stress, which definitely doesn't help with illness of any sort. So one of the reasons why I really wanted to put together something like this is because I did things the wrong way first. and now over time, I've sort of, it's still always like a roll of the dice. I never know what I'm going to be getting at any given time, but I figured something out that feels so much more sustainable. And it's not that I'm not sick. It's not that I can ever forget that I have lupus and fibromyalgia and other chronic conditions, but they don't control my life the same way they did, at least not as negatively as before. And I understand, whether I like it or not, what I need to do in order to stay at this hobby and these sports that I love, as well as what I can do as an athlete to not only prolong my longevity in HEMA, but what I can do as a chronically ill person in a preventative sense by taking care of my body and listening to it, while also figuring out a balance of how and when to be active, and learning to listen for when that needs to change. And I would really like to share some of that, obviously, with you folks here. And yeah, that's basically where I'm starting with, and where I'm coming from. The other thing that I want to sort of mention is I've really endeavored as a coach and a teacher to learn as much as I can about other chronic conditions that may affect folks, such as, you know, we're talking about physical conditions, EDS, multiple sclerosis, obviously stuff like I have, such as lupus and fibromyalgia and IBS, but also IBS's much more uglier cousin, Crohn's disease. Coming from personal experience, I also deal with things such as, you know, early childhood diagnosis of ADHD, which alongside things like the diagnosis of a chronic illness, you know, manifests as adult depression and anxiety. Woo! So I'm sort of navigating life in a not physically ideal body, and also with a non-neurotypical mind. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, even though it presents its own unique challenges. I've also worked as a personal caregiver and personal support worker for folks with disabilities. I've had clients that were quadriplegic and needed full mobility aids and devices and full-time home care. And I've also had clients that were living with things such as Down syndrome and autism. So I've spent a lot of my life learning how to work with different sorts of people with different sorts of restrictions, needs, communication styles, and learning styles, which has really made me passionate about not only figuring out how I can do this for myself, but how I can work with different people and help them discover how, regardless of what it is that they're dealing with, that we can look at obtainable goals for them to make them feel successful, make them feel healthy, and make them feel part of a community. So yeah, I guess that's sort of my my general introduction. before I move on, and just to say that I'm not an expert, and the best thing that I can do, and the best thing that we all can do as instructors and coaches, or as fellow community members, is listen to the experiences of those around you, those who are differently abled, those that are working with different tool sets or from different places in their lives. Because if you listen with compassion and empathy to their lived experiences, even if these are not things that you deal with, you can be part of helping them find solutions to thrive within any environment. So before I move on, does anyone have any questions about anything that I have said so far? I ramble a lot.
Feel free to unmute your mics and jump in too if you're able to verbalize.
Yeah, so if no one has anything to say yet, let's move on to a couple of things insofar. So I've sort of broken this down into different parts, and part one is something that I like to call, if this is for folks that are living with some sort of disability. And this is sort of coming from my own personal experience, and I call this the talk. And this is not a talk that anyone wants to have with themselves, but it has to happen. And one of the things that, as someone with a chronic condition, regardless of what that is, needs to know is we cannot train like normal people. It doesn't mean we cannot be successful in our training. It doesn't mean that we can't even thrive and excel in this. But we cannot look at how normal people are able to go on their path or their journey in HEMA or in martial arts and say, okay, I can do it that way. You're setting yourself up for failure. You can go through the mourning process of wishing that it was that easy for you, wishing that it was that accessible for you. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And this is a really hard blow sometimes to a person's ego, speaking personally for myself, to have to admit that. But once I did, and admitting it doesn't mean that I have to like it, because Jesus, I don't like this at all. But the moment I was able to say, okay, I have to change the way that I go about this, I was able to start breaking things down in a way that has helped me become a better student and become a healthier practitioner. So what I did to be able to do that was I literally sat down and I wrote out, what does my disability look like? Now, for someone like lupus, this is very interesting. It's like I'm creating a stats character sheet where I'm like, okay, pain management. All right, roll the dice. Today that's a 12. All right. Brain fog. Roll the dice. Oh, 20. That's not too good today. You don't know, and the dice roll changes all the time. It's not even necessarily consistent. But regardless, I began listing the different ways that my disabilities affect me, cognitively, physically, and even emotionally. After that, I began to look at how my disabilities affect my daily life. For example, with my ADHD, I have learned to make lists and lists for my lists and then smaller lists for my bigger task lists. It works. And it's a way in which I can sort of focus myself to complete my daily tasks. So that's one way in which my ADHD affects my daily life. Let's look at something like my lupus. My lupus can affect my daily life in a lot of different ways. So I also looked at what are the extreme examples of this, as well as what are the milder examples of this. I'm always experiencing chronic pain. It just, depends whether it's on a level 2 or a level 10. And it's also important to realize that what's a level 4 for me or a level 5 for me is not necessarily someone else's 4 or 5, but that's its own separate thing. So once I looked at all the ways in which my disabilities affect my daily life, I then began to say, okay, so how will this mirror my training life? How will this potentially show up? Or how have I noticed it already show up within the ways that I train? Perfect example. Regardless of how good or bad of a day I'm having, around 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, I have a complete and utter crash where just basically a lot of my medications that I've taken throughout the day to help me manage my illness kind of come to their end. And my cognitive abilities completely crash. My brain fog goes right up. My motor control and timing out the window. I've literally watched myself do a drill consistently and then just have this moment where brain goes, yes, Kim, block the thing. And body goes, doink. And then I get bonked in the head. And I know at that point that that's a time for me to step out. And that's also important, is learning how to regulate yourself. The next thing that I did is look at things that can trigger different parts of my different conditions and what can make it worse or what can make it better. Once I began to look at these things, and I completely recommend that if you're someone living with a condition, it might take a while to do this, but break down all the ways in which your condition does affect you, things that make it worse, things that make it better. Then, once you have that in front of you, we need to look at how we can set up conditions with ourselves, with our coaches, and with our clubs that can help remove the barriers to accessibility related to our individual disabilities. And this will look completely different for each person and with each different disability and illness. So before we move on to look at examples of what that might look like for different things such as mental illnesses or physical illnesses, does anyone have any questions so far?
We do have some comments on the pain scale and how best to answer that as a person who suffers from chronic pain. Like how would you recommend discussing that with a physician?
I just have to say, if I can, like, I have migraine issues, scoliosis, and impinged hips in both my hips, plus sciatica. And it's just like, when I go to the doctor, how's your pain level for this? And it's kind of like, I have to refrain from just kind of staring at them and laughing.
Yep. Yeah, well,
like,
you saw
nothing more than usual. I'm here, so I got up in the morning. That's something, right?
Exactly, and it's the idea of this is the new normal. What used to register as a 4 or 5 on my scale is now something where I'm like, oh, a flu? Oh, the common cold? I feel that crappy every day. Like that's a 2 now. Part of that is also making sure that you communicate that to your doctor, just being like, here's the thing, doc, I'm not doing well. I'm in pain. This is not good. Am I managing it? Yeah, but like
I don't know for anyone else, but I've found that it's helpful when if I can't describe the pain level, I describe the pain type and how it's affecting my current daily life, because that seems to be a better answer than pain level. Like, the number chart and the face chart mean absolutely nothing to me at this point.
No, and a lot of things also with a lot of people's chronic conditions, be these mental illnesses or physical illnesses, it's not necessarily consistent. There might be things that are always consistently there, but the severity of them can change, whether it's people with arthritis having much more problems on a very, very rainy or cold day, to folks with asthma in the summer when it's hot and humid, depending on where they're located. And if their training space is either outdoors, which a lot of HEMA clubs are, or indoors without the best air conditioning, we need to consider those things. So that's the other thing is, you know, what's it like having this or having that? It's like, well, that changes every day. And that also leads back into the whole thing about writing out and understanding what your condition looks like at its, you know, best and what it looks like at its worst.
So I have a question from a coach perspective. So I had students, right, that like I don't have any of these things myself, but I have students who have them. And the same way that I have people who are a little shy to try things, I've had times in which the student is overworking and I need them to understand to tone it down. But then usually that conversation can go pretty wrong, kind of like, because they feel like I'm telling you cannot do this, rather than you need to be aware of what's happening. How do I help you take better care of yourself without driving you into a very uncomfortable conversation? Like, how do I make that transition of like, you need to cool it down right now in a way that it's not painful or challenging or kind of like conflicting? Like, how do I approach that conversation?
Part of it from a coaching perspective is and I'm going to get to this later in the talk, but we can bridge this gap now, is creating a culture from the very start that allows conversations like this to happen, as well as certain expectations as this. Perfect example is, if your club has this is great. If they don't, create a welcome package, which has everything from not only your code of conduct, but places where if students want to disclose, they can list things from their pronouns to their disabilities, as well as how that affects them. So that can give us the opportunity, even without a conversation to have happened yet, to not only gain this information, but let potential new students know that these are conversations that are potentially going to happen. It's right there in the welcome package. This is already being asked. Other ways to do this is to, just like when you have a liability waiver that says things like, you know, practicing martial arts might mean that you, accidentally get hurt. Have things that explain that your coach and instructor always has your best interest at heart. So if your coach or instructor asks you to do something, be it as simple as, hey, just slow down the drill. Or, hey, you know what? I'm kind of noticing you're getting a little bit ramped up right now. And it's not that I don't see that you're dedicated and wanting to do really great work, but I think we're bridging a point where you might either injure yourself or someone else. So I'd really like you to either sit down, or if you want, like, we can go over into the corner and I'll work with you privately, or we can, you know, do something else. By having those conversations right away with potential students, even in your introductory class, like explaining that these are things that you will have, it's setting up these expectations. It's also creating a culture where you're already trying to stress the idea that we actually need to leave parts of our egos at the door, even the parts of us that really want to do well. Life with cats. I'm definitely guilty of wanting to like push past certain points or wanting to continue past the point where it's not good for me. And you know what? Sometimes it's really good to make sure that I have my own teachers and that I'm still a student, so I can have people that can sometimes see me from an outside perspective and maybe notice stuff that I haven't yet. So as hard as those conversations can be to bridge, even just making sure that you spend the time to assure folks that this has nothing to do about you doubting their skill or their passion or enthusiasm or their ability to be able to do it later. But right now they're not in the state where that's ideal, and that's okay. But we have to make those sorts of things a normal occurrence in our club. And that relates to the culture and the community that we try to create.
So that's the interesting part, because we do that when we start, like in our club, you do have to fill in like medical conditions that we might know about. And usually the trouble part does not come in the group classes, because that it's actually, to me, it's easier in a group class to get people to like tone it down or whatever. It's more on private lesson settings. Like when it's one-on-one, And they're trying to get us like, no, like that's where the conversation, like it's in a 101 scenario. The few times that I've had to have a conversation like that, when we both are already aware of the medical situation, right? It's like more like, hey, so I had a student who had autism, and she was not able to realize when she was pushing it too hard. And it would happen that she will overwork it, and then she will end up throwing up because she just pushed it herself too much, and she cannot self-regulate that, right? So I will try to figure out those things for her and pause things before that happened. But when I try to tone things down so we did not reach to that end, I think to her it felt like I was not letting her really work, and like I was limiting her. And that was when it was kind of like confrontational.
Really tough place, tough conversations to have, but also a really weird place to try to figure out where you need to be, one, listening to what someone else's wants and desires are in regards to their training and their body, but also as their coach, sometimes having to step in and say, just even say, I am not comfortable. Don't even make it about them. Say, I am not comfortable moving past this point. And have a conversation with the mapper saying, I'm really sorry about that, but that's, you know, that's where I'm at. And if that's something that you don't like or aren't willing to work with in our relationship as a student and coach, then maybe we should find someone else for you to work with. And again, that's not an insult, but you have absolutely every right to do that. And you can make it about yourself as opposed to them.
I love that. Thank you.
Oh, there seems to be, so many things in the chat. What is here?
Just continued discussions over how chronic pain skews and warps and how it can impact injury recognition.
That can also be very hard because, again, we're used to certain aspects of pain as the new normal. And that was another thing, is I had to start to learn to identify what was, this is just like my fibromyalgia pain, or, this is this, versus, no, this is potentially injury pain, or no, this is overtraining pain and I need to scale it back or take a pause. And that takes a lot of, that doesn't come overnight, no matter how aware you are. That takes, unfortunately, some aspects of trial and trial and error. Oh, what is this right here we have in the chat?
What about talking to instructors about positions and movements that are uncomfortable as a result of injuries?
So that again comes from, I almost feel like I need to skip to the last part of aspects of like this lecture, which is absolutely fine, is when it comes to talking to our instructors, that's really, really important. But we also have to ask ourselves is, what have we done in our clubs and communities as either coaches, but also as just regular students and community members, to make the rest of the people in your community feel comfortable enough to tell you of these things? And again, this is going to relate back to, so if you take nothing else away from this, I want to talk about what I like to call the big C's. The big C's basically come down to how we communicate the culture that we wish to create and the community we choose to connect with through our coaching and mentorship. Those are the big C's. So a lot about how we approach our instructors, and this is just a personal opinion, yes, I think that it is absolutely important for students to express those things to instructors, but even more so, I feel it is important for us as instructors and us as club members to ensure that we are creating a space where conversations like that can happen without fear of being pushed past our boundaries. What does that look like? That might look like a student saying, hey, you know what? Can you slow it down a little bit? I'm having a bit of trouble getting it, or my response time's not the best that night. And having your partner go, oh, don't worry, no, you'll be fine, it's fine, or that's why you're wearing a mask. That right there has already told that student that at least with that person, boom, maybe I can't trust them. They've already pushed me past my boundaries. That's a no. Do we hear instructors or other students making comments about someone being weak or slow, or how challenging it is to have to work with them? If we are hearing these conversations in our club and we are not shutting them down, whether we are coaches or instructors ourselves, or just other students and members of this club, then we are participating to a community that makes it all the more difficult for someone with a disability to feel comfortable talking about it. So, as to kind of answer your question a little bit, Amber, yes, you do need to talk to your instructors about that, and you need to find a way to do that that works best for you, whether that's privately through an email, before or after class, however you want to. But more so than anything else, I think it's a collective issue as to what we can do as a community to make conversations like this the norm. Is there anything else in the chat?
So one of the things that I've been trying to do, just with the dancing background, I have this like weird ability to communicate and understand like what muscles are going to be activated depending on what drill we're doing and how other people's bodies are going to interact too. So when I'm describing these drills, I try very hard to highlight the key areas they should be feeling things. Just to even open that conversation up itself, right? That gives words and vocabulary to those who might not have the correct descriptors to use
So
when they say, whoa, slow down, you know.
Let's link that back to the big C's that I talked about. So by doing that, you are contributing to the 1, communication aspect of that. 2, you are creating to the community and culture that you want to create by starting those conversations. I'm going to keep relating it back to these big C words. I'm a big fan. Big fan. C is for coaching. That's good enough for me. C is for community. That's good enough for me. Sorry, when I get nervous, I get like super weird. Like all the time.
No, you're just hitting all of the different mnemonics. Like people don't.
So I guess before we move on, one of the things, so you know, we'll get back to more of the big C's again, but what I'd like to talk about is to relate things back to once we've sort of had the conversation with ourselves that we are disabled or we are differently abled. This is not a bad thing. This is not a good thing. This is just how it is. And we look at how that affects our daily life and how this might manifest itself in our training life. The next step is looking at how we can create and set up the conditions that help remove the barriers and the accessibility related to our disabilities. So what might that look like? One of the things that came up a bunch when I first was talking to folks through my personal Facebook page about things that they wanted to see, and something that has come up a lot with friends and colleagues and clients over the years, is mental health hacks. So when dealing with mental health issues like bipolar or depression, where even being able to commit to a regular schedule or routine can have its own challenges, especially in times like now, like COVID, where everything's sort of up in the air, it's even more difficult. So what are things that we can do to try to work past that? So for me, one of the things that I've done to try to kind of hack through my own depression tendencies is to set up stuff where other people are reliant upon me. whether it's the regular Zoom classes that I host through the Academy of European Medieval Martial Arts through the pandemic, to the regular classes and workshops and stuff that I do pre-pandemic times. I keep myself busy and I keep people relying on me, because personally, I know that for me, even when my depression's really bad, if there's something greater or bigger than myself that is requiring me to show up, I can usually push past that to be there. So it's another reason why I give away a lot of my services when I'm coaching people or showing people how to weightlift or do things as beginners. Why I do this for free. One, I think that fitness training and stuff like that needs to be so much more accessible than it already is, and is already way too expensive and way too much of a commodity, but that's its own separate rant as well. But these people are helping me, because if I know that this person needs me to show up and show them something new or check their form or help them through something that they're a beginner with, by virtue of being there, I'll be able to show up for myself and then do my workouts and do my stuff later. Other things that I do for mental health hacks is I try to announce to people, whether it's close friends or even publicly, that I'm going to host a workout or do this sort of, do a heavy lifting schedule. Again, because I'm a list person, I find when I write something down and I watch it like staring me in the face, if I can't cross it off, like I'll get a finger wagging at myself. So things like that can make me, again, have to sort of like show up for myself and tell people that I'm going to do this. So they'll check in on me later saying, hey, how was that workout? Oh, I didn't do it, or no, I didn't do that thing. The other thing is as coaches, if we know that we have a student that is working with some sort of mental health disorder or is dealing with some sort of trauma, one of the things that we can try to do is reach out privately and just say, hey, noticed you haven't been showing up to class lately. Just wanted to say, like, one, we miss you, and two, is there anything going on that we should be aware of, or is there anything that I can do to make coming back more easy or accessible to you? Whether it's working with you for a day or two before you come back just to review the stuff you've missed, or just having a couple of conversations about where you're at. Sometimes that can go a huge way for people. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but these are just things that I found through my experience have helped me not only be able to work through some of my own mental health conditions, particularly involving things like my ADHD and my depression, but also things that I have found has helped me be able to reach out and better communicate to students that are also sometimes working through these things as well. And the other thing that I feel is really, really difficult, but really, really important to have to talk about, is learning how to strike the balance between compassion, which is some days it's okay to say, I just can't do it. Today is a couch day where all I do is binge watch Netflix, or today it's just too much. I feel that if I show up there, I will not be in a really good mindset for training, and I think it'll only make things worse for me than if I just stay home tonight and try again tomorrow. Being able to show gentle compassion and being imperfect in ourselves, but also making sure that we balance that with not making too many excuses or slipping into the mentality of, well, I'm not going to do this unless I can show up as my 110% best and do it perfectly. And that can be very, very difficult. But it's important to strike that balance, to give yourself permission to rest or permission to show up and be imperfect, but also not let yourself sort of slip into too many excuses that allow you to break out of your routine. Does anybody have any questions or comments related to like mental health hacks or things that they have found have helped work for them, or things that they would maybe like to try to put into their toolbox to help use with, you know, helping their own students or themselves? I'm gonna lean forward and press the button for the chat.
Ooh, brain fog. How do you deal with brain fog?
You don't. I'm just kidding. Brain fog's a tough one.
Yeah.
It-
Yeah. That gets tricky, especially when you're in class and you're just like, I'm trying to pay attention to what they're doing here. And I'm just like, I'm pretty sure that I did not catch that.
You need to be comfortable in being able to say that. And that was Amber, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Amber can also relate, like, to me, and I say this with love and kindness, but like, some of our instructors are fantastic at being able to have these conversations, and others are a little bit more easily frustrated by them. And part of that comes with instructing and coaching is its own unique skill set that is very different from just being a good fencer. And part of that is learning how to start creating things within our community which can make us, as teachers, more approachable and gentle if we have to repeat ourselves. Tamara says something which is really, really interesting about particularly dealing with things like PTSD. And I will definitely state that as I have definitely seen this manifest in myself. I actually have CPTSD as one of my conditions, as well as with students. This is also very likely, or more likely, to come out in students that identify as different minorities, be they physically disabled. Because let me tell you, a lot of people that are disabled have a lot of trauma related to having their boundaries inflicted upon physically, or being forced in situations, denied by medical staff, a lot of trauma around hospitalization. People with, you know, there's so many different types of examples with that. And as instructors, being able to recognize when a student is in distress and might not be able, because their body is in either we have not just fight or flight, we have freeze as an option. When we might not be in a place, or your student might not be in a place where they can orate that they need help or that they need something to stop. And I think it's really important for clubs and schools to try to make it a priority that their instructors start taking different sorts of workshops or initiatives to learn more about stuff like this. It's one thing to be a good fencer and to know your Fiore or to know your Lichtenauer, but it's another thing to be able to convey that while also being a good coach and teacher, and someone that is not only safe but aware.
How do you approach something like that? Do you speak? Do you verbalize to try to bring them back? Do you go through the grounding process?
Well, I think it really depends what is needed for each individual student. And again, these are conversations you can have with your coach, like, hey, if you see me acting like this, or when I'm having an anxiety attack, things that really help is if you help me focus on things like something I can smell, something I can see, something I can touch, something I can taste. For other people, they need to be left alone and have no one witness them or talk to them. And it's like, hey, if you see me like this, you just need to give me space and don't follow me, and I'll self-regulate. Again, this is going to look different for each and every person. And learning these different subtleties about your individual students, yeah, it takes work, but it's our responsibility to do that work, because not only does it allow us to acquire the tools to teach this student better, these are tools that will allow us to become overall better coaches and teachers.
Mhm.
So we looked at a couple of things involving like mental health hacks. What are things that we can do with ourselves or with our schools in regards to our physical needs? A lot of stuff that came up in conversations previously were things like how to change our own expectations, and kind of switching things from I can't do this to, okay, what can I do instead? I have a knee injury right now where I can't do any sort of free sparring whatsoever. What can I do? I can do drills up to a certain speed where I am aware of any sort of movement or motion I can make. I can do solo cutting and thrusting. I can go through footwork. It's instead of focusing on, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this, this is horrible, switching around to, well, what can I do? Or what can I do today? And sometimes, and Amber can even attest to this for me as a coach, there's numerous times where I've shown up to Emma, and after I'm done teaching my class, I can't participate, but I stay there and I go into what we used to have was called our armory, which also had our library, and I'd pull out the Getty and I'd start working on notes and working on new classes and workshops, but also physically being available in the space. So if there were students that needed to take a time away from the actual lesson could come in and speak to me. So I was still being a valuable member of the community. So I still stuck around, even though there was many things I couldn't do. There was many things that I could do and can do, which still contributed to me being part of this community, but also to my own practice and study. Other things that came up were what happens. So a lot of people's different physical conditions often come in flares. Speaking for myself, lupus is like that, fibromyalgia, lots of different conditions. What happens when we're training for something, let's say a tournament, and you've done everything you can, you've trained your best, you've trained your hardest, you've been eating well, you've been sleeping right, you haven't had too much stress outside of planning for this tournament in your life, but oops, your disease flares up. Tournaments this weekend. What do you do? This is tough. And there are aspects of mourning that I don't think will ever stop for folks that have to deal with a chronic condition like that can take away things. But what we can do is change our expectations. So what that might look like is, okay, I might just try to, you know what, I'm not going to back out of the tournament, but instead of trying to hope that I maybe get a medal this time, my goal is going to be just to get out of my pool. Or my goal is going to be, I'm exhausted today, my reaction time's really, really bad. I just hope that I can score 1 point in each of my fights, and I'll call that a victory. Again, it sort of like, it's very hard sometimes to maintain your optimism when you're living with conditions that often feel like they steal so much away from you. But if we can try to turn things around from a can't mentality to a can mentality, or how do I adjust my expectations realistically that still fit into sort of my goals or what I've set up. And again, by doing this and being okay with doing this, you're also setting examples for other folks. It's hard to have to say, especially when you want to be there, actually, you know what, I need to back out. Or even just in our social fight nights, where by the end of the night, I've promised a couple of more bouts, but I'm just getting the message from my bodies that I'm done, and I have to tell my friends who I was super looking forward to sparring with, can't do it. But by doing that, you're giving permission for other people to do so in the future. And again, it's all relating back to creating the sort of conversations and community that we want to see that makes accessibility more than just a hashtag, but a thing that is actionable, a verb, a doing. And we can't do that by being inactive. Verbs don't do that way. They are action words. Oh my goodness, there's so much on the chat. I just talk. Yeah. How are we doing for time? Oh my goodness, I've been yapping for an hour. I need more of my smoothie. There we go. So another thing to think about, and this actually, I believe Jacinta was one of the persons that brought this up, is figuring out what our bare minimum is. So when we're at our worst, or when we're in a flare, what does our bare minimum look like, and when is that optimal? For example, whether I'm in a flare or not, I know my best time cognitively is early afternoon till early evening. I also know that that's also my physical best time. In a flare, that can be reduced greatly to a smaller window, or I might not have any capabilities in the physical sense. There are times where I have had my lupus here that I couldn't even shower because the motions of lifting my arms up to wash and move the shampoo around was too painful. Where I've had to have my partner, who's here in the chat, bring out our spare bed because I can't get up and down the stairs with ease to our loft bed up there. And then 3 weeks later, I can be squatting my own body weight in the gym. So who knows? But what does it look like when I'm at my worst? What can I still do? Whether it's changing my focus to working with the texts, changing my focus to going on to the Emma YouTube page and rewatching a bunch of the old rank exam videos and fight videos, and learning how to be okay with the unfortunate inconsistencies that can come with balancing these sorts of diseases. What is it in chat here? I think that most people, regardless of what sort of condition they're dealing with, all have aspects of their condition that create circumstances which can make them prone to particularly anxiety and depression. And again, there are some days where, it's better than others. And then there are days where you really do have that devil on your shoulders saying, why bother? It's always going to be difficult for you. Why bother? You're always going to have backtracks. Why bother? It'll take you twice as long to get half as far as everyone else. And in times like that, I really need to ask myself, what would my life be like if I listened and gave up these things that I have? If I gave up HEMA, if I gave up weightlifting, if I gave up swimming and bicycling, that's not a life that I'm happy with. So even if I can't do it perfectly, even if there's many times I can't do it at all because I need to take a break, the idea of not having it around seems far, far worse by listening to that voice than if I find a way to tell that voice to shut the front door. And what can I do? What do I have?
As a person who decided to give everything up for a while after a serious injury and a mental health dip, it does the opposite of what I thought it would. I was hoping for a full reset where I would like form this chrysalis and come out like way better on the other side, which was stupid. It took away the things that were making me happy, and it took away the things that I never even considered having a value when I gave stuff up. Like the community, the social aspect. Like in my head, I was like, oh, it's just lifting weights. I can do that by myself, but I like doing it with other people. I like being in a class. I like learning a system. I like building skills and having it not just be
something greater than yourself.
Yeah, like there needed to be more. But unfortunately, it took me quite a few years to figure that out.
It often does, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you know, don't cut everything out, I guess is the point here.
And you do have to cut some things out or limit things or figure out what the new balance is. And it sucks, like it's going back to that talk that we had to have at the beginning. You can't have it all. You can't do what normal or other people do. That's again neither good or bad. It's just what is. But seeking out what can still bring you joy or purpose, health and community is essential. It's essential for us to have as individuals, I think, on a very base human level. And I personally believe that it is an essential responsibility for us as community members to make sure that we're contributing to that for other people. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a Canadian, maybe it's because I'm a God's darn hippie, but I don't know how to not care about other people and other people's experiences and how I'm contributing or not contributing to that. But I'm just crazy, right? Oh, someone says yeah, we can often be our own worst enemies. Absolutely. Speaking for myself, that's absolutely true. And a lot of the things that I preach and a lot of the things that I believe in tend to be applied to everyone else except myself, or only to myself, usually after I kind of have like this other part of myself basically pull like a Rafiki and do the like, and like smack them on the head, you know. I'm getting better at that, and that's honestly part of my own journey. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so open about my own struggles, even learning how to do these things and still messing up along the way. I think whoever was speaking just a few minutes ago mentioned, you know, when talking about giving things up is chrysalises and our journeys and our healing, one, are not linear, and two, even when they are successful and beautiful and inspiring, they are usually, I'm gonna swear, they're messy as fuck. And I've often found that in our Western world, we try to commodify the idea of the perfect healing or the perfect sick person, the perfect person with mental health issues. That doesn't exist. We try to commodify how the beauty of healing, and that if it doesn't, you know, smell like roses and sage, then you're doing it wrong. No, it's gonna be, a swamp is teeming with just as much life as a verdant forest. And we need to travel through both to understand what our healing is. Both have life, both are important, and we need to reconcile as not only individually, but as a frickin' culture, that even when we become these newer, better versions of ourselves, it's not always gonna be pretty. I am continuously taking my own ego and going, hey, knock it off. We've been over this. Because that's part of it. And it's through sometimes those big slaps I give to myself that I eventually come to the places of better understanding actual happiness and self-love. But even that's not permanent. I'll have things that trigger me or pull me back into those other states. And that again is okay. Again, this is not linear. It doesn't work like this. It kind of works a little bit more like this. Oh my goodness, the chat's blowing up. What are folks saying? Oh, that feeling like you're holding back the group. Yeah, you're not. Not only that, like, I don't want a group or anyone in my club who's going to actively feel that way about someone else. But again, that's just me. And I know that I often feel like when I have to put in restrictions that I'm holding whoever I'm being partnered with back. And I have to sometimes remind myself, I need to give the same compassion that I would to someone else experiencing what I am, that to myself. There we go. So I've touched on this a bunch throughout the conversation so far. So let's start looking into what we can do as teachers and coaches. And I've tapped on this already. Like I have my own lived experiences, but I'm not an expert on every disease, every mental health illness. I'm 36 years old, but I don't know what it's like to be, 56 years old and menopausal. I have a physical disability that can show up in pain and mobility issues and motor control. But this is also very different than someone who has something like a recent surgery that they're recovering from. The best way that we as coaches can figure out what we can do to help these folks is to communicate with them and to listen to their lived experiences. And they might not have anything else to compare this to yet. It might be new to them, but work with them, have these conversations, ask them what this pain looks like and feels like to them. Ask them what success looks like to them. Ask your student that has come to you to tell you that they have bipolar, what that looks like for them and what you might be able to do to help. Ask your older students that are going through menopause, hey, how does that affect you? Oh, no wonder why you're gassing out of sparring so early. You're having so many hot flashes and trouble with like heat regulation. I don't have to personally experience it to compassionately listen to someone else's experience with it, empathize, and be able to relate and work with them on those levels. Talk to people. Ask them what it's like to live in their bodies and in the space that they personally inhabit and what that looks like. This is the best way that we can learn how to work with them as coaches and teachers. And again, this all comes back to how do we create a space where this happens? The big C's, again and again and again. You have your notebooks, please write this down. As coaches, the big C comes back to the way that we communicate the culture that we wish to create, and the way that we coach and lead by example and connect to the community that we choose. None of this is possible without the proper support. What does that look like? How do we create the structures in our communities that allow this to happen? What does actual accessibility, actual diversity, and actual inclusivity looks like in action? And again, this relates to things that aren't just physical disability. Because I will say this as a femme presenting, queer, disabled, neurodivergent person, I look for other signs within the communities that I go to that give me hints that I might be able to feel safe communicating these needs and restrictions that I have. What does this look like? Even if I'm not LGBTQ, which I do identify as, is the space I'm in have any stickers or flags or things on the wall that show LGBT pride or acceptance? Is there something in the code of conduct with those welcoming packages that talk about diversity and inclusion, and that this space is welcoming to all genders, all religions, all backgrounds, and accessibility? These are all cues that tell me that this place is more likely to be a place where I can ask for these things and hopefully have them met. And we do this by, as coaches, leading by example. For me, what this looks like is there are days where I come in to teach where I tell my students I'm not doing good, where I'll even say, while I'm demonstrating a technique, I'll ask my partner who is demonstrating it with me to do it slowly and say, folks, I'm gonna have to actually do this at half speed because my wrist and my elbow are really bothering me today, and blah, blah, blah. Again, if I as a teacher can show them that I don't have to be perfect, or that I can be imperfect and still do this well at this scale, I'm leading by example and giving them permission to do so. I've shown up to classes and had to ask for assistance, even demonstrating certain techniques that I can't do at the moment. I've had to show up and say, hey, I'm not doing really good. Going through a bit of an emotional upheaval. I've had 2 anxiety attacks this week. I really don't think I should stay for sparring tonight because I think that environment might set or trigger me. This is how we as coaches start, by leading by example. Also, the language that we use as coaches is a way that we lead by example. Do we say things or allow others at our clubs and schools to say things that use ableist language, racial slurs, homophobic slurs? Whether we're using them or not, if we're allowing these to be said or spoken of in our schools and clubs, we are creating or allowing for situations which tell students that this place might not be safe. Things that we can do actively is not only making sure that we don't say things like this within our clubs, but what languages are we using? Am I using gender neutral pronouns when I'm addressing a large group of people? What are ways that I, as an instructor or coach, can make small little signals, go ahead, call them what they are, virtue signals, to members of my club that let them know that they are welcome, whether it's wearing a pride button during Pride Month or anything like that. These are ways in which we lead by example to communicate the culture that we want to create within our clubs and community. And when we are met with people that don't mesh with that, it's as simple as, hey, we don't say that here. Hey, we don't do that there. And if you mess up, which guess what, you will along the way, say, oh, thanks for telling me. Make sure I don't do that again. These are the sorts of conversations and communication that I'm talking about with those big letter C's. So what we need to do is not only communicate this and lead by example as coaches, but we need to create a culture that puts absolutely zero doubt about its commitment to inclusion for not just our disabled students, but students that come from any sort of background or minority group that can put up barriers for them being able to do HEMA. And I kind of went off on my own little rant there, but welcome to my world. Other things that we can do as coaches. When we're in a teaching position and we know that we have students not just at different skill levels, but of different pain levels or dealing with different disabilities, can we create different ways to scale up or down a drill's difficulty or intensity? How do we encourage class partners to communicate things to each other? Do we make it so that when we have our classes switch partners or do a different drill, if they want to? I know for some folks it's very important that they keep one or two partners that they work really well with, and that's fine. But do you encourage them before they start just going into their drills to communicate stuff like, oh, hey, by the way, my right shoulder is really bugging me. So when we do, the first defensive dagger, kind of like watch your force a little bit so it doesn't like, yoink my shoulder out of place. That'd be great. And as instructors, we also have to be very okay to say things like, I'm not at my best, or I need to scale things down for myself. We also have to be able to show our own vulnerability in not always having all the answers, whether it's to our art or to how to even deal with a problem with a student that might arise due to a physical disability or a mental trigger. Not all of us have done the sort of training or come from a background where they have experience with that. That's okay. No one person can be the be all and end all of everything, but being able to be okay with the fact that you don't always have everything in your toolbox yet, but being willing to work on these things is super, super important. Being okay to be imperfect, to fail, to being accountable to doing better along the way only encourages your students to try to do the same. And I guess at this point, we're almost getting towards the end of things. I've ranted at my phone screen for almost 90 minutes. Is there anything that folks would like to ask from either the perspective of what they can do as coaches and instructors, or even just things that they want to share that's helped them along their ways, or things that they're going to try to do, whether it's like, what, that's a good suggestion. I'm going to try to contact a friend and get them to hold me accountable to my weekly workouts or to my, weekly study, Zoom study group where we look at the Zettel or what have you. Push this button, it shows the chat. Does anybody have any things to ask? It's brilliantly interesting ranting. Thanks, Tamara. I'm glad you folks get a kick out of me, because anytime I go back and listen to podcast interviews I've done or things like this, oh my God, watching me on video is, you'd think coming from a performance background that I would get used to it. Not at all. I'm like, oh my God, people listen to me. Oh my God, I'm so weird. What's wrong with you people? Why do you want me around? I think it's really important to routinely do things before the situation comes up. If you're not comfortable with trying this, come and see me and we'll find an alternative. Yes, 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 yes. Just regularly mentioned in the context of drills, especially with new students when they may not be comfortable yet initiating that conversation. Well said, Carrie, yes. Peter says, tips for changing elements of established culture. Oh, I'm gonna take another sip of my drink for this, Peter. I'm also gonna take a look for a quick in the momento por favor. So, all right, story time with Kimmy. I'm currently working at a school that is Canada's oldest HEMA school. We are in Canada's largest city, and we also have probably the most clubs location of any HEMA school as well. most of my senior instructors and the founders of my school are in their late 50s and identify as white, heterosexual, cisgendered, conservative men. I've had to do a lot of work to get my club to where it is today. And we still have a long ways to go. This is not me saying anything. I'm not trying to say anything negative about this. This is all about accountability and moving forward. I made the choice to train with the school because I think the folks there are wonderful. I've seen that even if they don't know how to do things or might be a little stubborn, that they are willing to work to do better, to learn and to grow. That to me is worth something because I did it. I went out and started my own club when I first moved back to Ontario, and my students loved it. I hated it. I like learning from other people. I like having folks that are better than me around to show me things. I also saw a club that not only really knows their Fiore, and I say this as someone that has traveled and taught with many, many schools. I think as a Fiorist, Emma has one of the best overall knowledge available and has helped me immensely on my path as a Fiorist, but also because of its and the fact that it's in Canada's largest, one of the world's most multicultural. I want to make this place better than when I walked into it. I would like them to start implementing the kind of culture and stuff that I'm talking about right here. And it's been a lot of work. Let's talk about femme people and minority groups' emotional and physical labor and the fact that we just can't train. But I feel it's been worth it. I like the changes that I'm seeing. I like where my club is going. And I like that something that has the history and the curriculum and the amazing experiences and wisdom that my club has be able to change and blossom and grow. And I think it's something worth fighting for. I also believe that there sometimes comes a time where if that work is stagnant or has been completely and totally resisted, that sometimes you just have to walk away and create something better. And I can't tell any one person when they should stay and fight or when it's time for them to forge and do something new, as well as the fact that being able to break away and forge and do something new has to come with its own immense amounts of support and privilege that not everyone has. That can be a tough one. And what I'm going to say to you, Peter, and I say this as someone that knows and loves you, like, dearly, my friend, be the change that you want to see, even if your other instructors, even if the other folks in your club aren't there yet. Use gender neutral pronouns. Have the conversations with your students that you wish your instructors had had with you. And it might be difficult, but challenge the ones that aren't. And if you're not comfortable with that, that's okay. But you can at least lead by that example yourself. And I say this, I know that I'm speaking to you, Peter, but I speak to everyone. You once told me that I have a heart as big as the sun, but that's exactly what I think of you. And I think that if we take our hearts like that and lead through example, that that's exactly how we deal with changing the culture. It's by being that change ourselves. And that sounds corny as heck, but that's kind of my MO. Really, I am like super aggressive, tough loving, like, I'm your biggest fan, do it. That's kind of the Kimmy way.
I mean, if nothing else, Peter, too, I'm sorry, but if nothing else, you're creating that safe space. You're making yourself that safe person. So even if your other instructors aren't willing to make that change, you're creating an environment that's safe for those people, right? So you're their ally. They're going to come to you.
Yes, absolutely. And this is why I say that it's not just something that we should be doing as coaches, but what we as just general practitioners in the community can be doing to make this normal. And I see these conversations happen. I see these changes happening in HEMA, even if it's come with a lot of freaking grief and a lot of hard work. It's happening, and I really like where this is going. Yeah, sometimes the responsibility is scary, but it is absolutely so worth it. And I really like what Gia said up there, where that's why I became an instructor, to do the things that I wish my instructors had done. It's really beautiful.
I also liked how Gia mentioned that there's no negative self-talk allowed in their club.
Ah, I like that too. So what happens though if someone starts doing that? What are things that you have in place?
So if someone uses negative self-talk, the first thing that we do is we call it out. We say, hey, that sounds a little bit like apologizing for taking up space, or that sounds like negative self-talk. And then the whole group will say, maybe here's a different way you could phrase that. Maybe you could say, I'm still working on my footwork, or I'm improving my tempo every time I practice. And then everyone who didn't indulge in negative self-talk gets to have an alcoholic beverage, and the person who did use negative self-talk has to drink water.
You know, your club is a lot like mine, at least with the using alcohol as a means as a reward system. One of the old mantras of Emma is they are a drinking club with a sword problem.
Yeah. But it becomes a really good community builder as well, because then everybody is helping everybody else to maintain positivity. And there's a lot of encouragement and collaboration going on about everything.
That's fantastic, and that's amazing that you've created that within your club. That's a fantastic example of what actual accessibility and communication like that looks like in action. So bravo, gotta say. Oh, more things in the chatty chat. Brent has signed off. Carrie, in a Fiore club, you could be like, would Fiore ever say bad things about himself? Never! I saw a GIF that like best described Fiore, which is that like scene from like The Simpsons when Homer's, recounting like the birth of all the different like, Simpsons children, and Bart's going through the terrible toddler stage, and he's got the pot on his head and the pan in his hand and the spoon, and he's going, it's so great. It's so great. Everybody loves me. It's so great. That's basically modern Fiore in a nutshell. Would Fiore talk smack about himself? Never. I like that.
Chickadee Ballet is very much the same.
Oh, Brent's still here. Brent got to stick around to watch me make a fool of myself. Thanks. Eric says, thank you. Good. I hope you folks have some actionable stuff. Again, if there's any questions or things that people want to bring up, or even, questions about, hey, I have another student with lupus. Can you give me some pointers on this? Or, hey, you mentioned that you've done work with, as a PSW with folks with living on the autism spectrum. What are things that you have found? I have a couple of autistic students on the spectrum that I'd love to be able to work with better. Again, everyone's different, but I can use the experiences that I have to maybe help share with you folks. Bloop, bloop, bloop.
I'm curious what you would classify as ableist language.
Ableist language. Oh, without naming names or clubs, things that I have heard instructors or people say to others. I'm sorry, you're not getting that drill. What are you, retarded? That would be ableist language. Another example of ableist language. Oh, what's wrong with you? You seem a little slow today in your sparring. Are you feeling gimpy? That's ableist language. I don't even like saying these things as examples. They feel dirty coming out of my mouth. But this is stuff that I have heard in my time at different HEMA clubs or events, and it's wrong.
I guess I was hoping for more like subtle. Like
Ah!
I think we all know that those are like hard nosed, like don't ever say these. They're completely exclusionary. But I feel like there are some subtle ways that those of us who don't struggle with mobility issues or don't struggle with brain fog would kind of shut down those that do.
I guess maybe I should ask examples of what are some of the ways that you have felt shut down with other more subtler forms of ableist language.
I like that. All of mine have been comments about my body and how it isn't built the way it needs to be in order for things to happen.
Or it isn't built the way it needs to be. Who has an opinion on your body who isn't you?
I grew up as a dancer. I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I grew up as
You can relate to some of the abuse that is
I know.
that toxic area.
It is. It absolutely is. And I know a lot of folks that come from a similar background that can say the same thing. I guess the only thing I can say is it's one, that is definitely a culture problem that I found in the greater dance community. Absolutely. Two, I think it's complete and utter donkey dung. Three, I'm really, really sorry that that has been your experience. And I'm sorry it's been a lot of people's experiences, depending on different hobbies or sports that they've gotten into, where they're told that, you know, you can only enjoy this if you look a certain way or have this certain kind of body type, or you're judged to whether or not your performance meets X criteria. You're judged on whether you look and have an aesthetic of Y. It's that a lot had to deal with in their pursuit of different hobbies and sports, and particularly a lot of femme-presenting people have definitely experienced that. I found even more so. Goodbye, Dashing Julie.
I guess that makes me feel a little better. I was like, when you mentioned the ableist language, I paused because I was like, I'm working on the gender inclusion. I'm working on all this other stuff. Crap. Am I contributing to this ableist atmosphere?
No, but at the time, it's always good to check yourself on stuff like that. Make sure you have those questions like, okay, like, am I still doing this? Or have I gotten better at this? When I use that term to describe this, could it have been potentially taken like this? I think these are great conversations that we should be having and unpacking with ourselves all the time anyways. Mm-hmm. And again, this is something that has come up for me, not necessarily with ableism, but in my my goals to be a good ally and support to my BIPOC friends. And sometimes what one person thinks of as exclusionary language is absolutely fine by another group that identify by the exact same labels or terms. Again, what's most important is communicating and listening to the people in your community and what their needs and what their comfort levels are. And again, being okay with sometimes screwing that up and then being accountable to do better.
I'm curious now, how many people in this lecture right now are actively instructing or coaching, and how many are students?
I know some folks had to leave, but I know that both Jen and Marley and Julie are all instructors.
Yep. I know Mariana is too.
Yeah, Mariana is. Marlene's an instructor, aren't you, darling? Peter is an instructor now. I do believe Gia is as well, based on some of their input. Yep, Julia, excellent. And I believe Justin, who is, I don't know if Justin is still here, but Justin started teaching rapier with Athena, if I'm not mistaken. Dina, you don't just help out often. You have like, you're like super assistant instructor, photographer, extraordinaire. You've made so many of the organizations and people that you work with able to do the things that they do better. You don't just help out often. You are often the best helper. I'm the quiet one. You're the quiet ones are often the busiest ones. Yeah, she is too modest. Of course she teaches. I've seen her. Hey, Dina, you're awesome. You contribute a lot and you do so much. And I know speaking for myself, but others here, we super appreciate you. I love you too. Gosh, I miss you folks so much. It's ridiculous. I thought being able to see you folks 3 to 5 times a year was like not enough. Now this is torturous. I miss y'all a lot.
I'm just picturing the HEMA reunions that are going to be happening once
Oh,
things calm down and there's a vaccine. Just fireworks going off everywhere in the shape of swords and daggers and
I guess like we're slightly over the initial time, and I think things are wrapped up. I just want to say, folks, you're more than welcome to try to reach out to me through different social media or personal means. Sometimes I'm slow to get back to you. It's not because I don't care. It's usually because I'm trying to do my own self-care first and can't do everything at once despite how much I try to. Yeah. Is there any like closing remarks from Marlene or
yeah,
any?
so I almost drowned myself, sorry. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. Again, this was recorded, so we will have
Yeah, that's right. I knew that though.
so we'll have the recording up in the event group on Facebook soonish, like within a day or two. And then for those that are that attended through the Tidy HQ, I can happily email you a copy of the link directly. We will also be posting this to our club YouTube channel that I can, I don't know, send out to you guys. I'll make a big post when it comes out. We have all of our, or most of our previous plague lectures up for review too. So feel free to indulge yourselves. Most of them are about an hour and a half or so
kind of
of
like
crazy content. Tomorrow, for those that are interested, I feel weird doing this. It's like a weird self-plug. No, it's creepy. So Mariana and I at 3 o'clock Eastern are doing a ring and chat for Give a Girl a Sword 2020 Pandemic Edition. So if you have any weird ring-in questions that you're like too embarrassed to ask, please ask. Like, I'm sure like we have all gone through them, and if we don't know the answer, I'm sure I can find someone who knows the answer.
Ah, there's a perfect example right there. Boom.
I think we're doing the chat. I have to find the event thing.
Mariana.
I think we're doing it via Zoom. It's posted in Espinges. For those of you that are interested in attending, I'm pretty sure I can create an event on our Tidy HQ. And I can also, I'll repost it to the CKDF Facebook page too. I don't know. I want as many people to show up as as possible. Espinges is putting it on. The stuff is there. But I'll try to make it more accessible for those who aren't members of Espinges, even though it's like super easy to join. You're just like, yes, I am an ally. Yes, I want to be here.
Yes, I believe women are people.
Right? Yeah, so that should be a cool thing. We are doing a craft and chat at the end of the month, which is like tomorrow, but I'm thinking we'll do it early August. Stay tuned, check our Tidy. Periodically, we're doing these until things resume to whatever post-COVID is.
Right. Well, here we go, friends. Thanks for listening to me rant at my phone screen for 90 minutes.
It was a good rant. I have notes.
ramble on. All right, I'm gonna go make dinner, and I'm going to probably pet my cats, and again, this lovely notebook right here from Lean, from my New York Hema fam, where I wrote all of my notes for today's lecture. Kitty, lifting kitty.
Night, you guys. Thanks, Kimmy, for doing this. Seriously.
Thank you so much for asking me. This was fantastic.
We'll happily be your experimental poll for the series that you eventually want to.
Oh gosh.
Holding you to it.
All right. Well, goodbye, friends. So good to see you all in digital form. I miss you greatly and love you all muchly. Thanks for having me.
Night.
Bye.
Bye.